Welcome back, everyone, to Trending Tidbits. Something I've been seeing online a lot is this whole debate about CBT,
Mm.
cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yeah.
If it's just like toxic positivity, you know, just slapping a happy face on and pretending everything's fine.
Right, right.
Is that really all it is?
It's a good question, and it kind of gets to the heart of what we think therapy should be, right? Like, what are we aiming for?
Exactly. And to help us figure this out, you've actually brought in some sources that go deeper into how CBT works.
Yeah, I did.
So maybe we can start there, like lay the groundwork.
Okay, sounds good.
And then see how that compares to some of the stuff you'd mentioned before, like Buddhism and those Eastern philosophies.
Perfect, yeah. So, to start, one of the things I found interesting is how therapy is actually defined.
Oh, okay.
It's described as a systematic approach to combating a problem, illness, or irregular condition.
So it's not just about feeling good, it's about actually tackling something.
Exactly. There's a real problem-solving aspect to it, and that's crucial to remember.
And I think you also mentioned CBT is backed by actual research. Like, this isn't just some self-help fad.
You got it. It's been scientifically tested and shown to be effective for a pretty wide range of issues, which is important.
That's good to know.
Oh.
So it's got that practicality, but how does it actually work?
Well, one of the core principles of CBT is this link between our thoughts and our feelings.
Okay.
In CBT, we call those thoughts cognitions. And those cognitions, those thoughts, directly impact how we feel and how we act.
So it's not just stuff happening to us, it's how our minds are processing it all.
Exactly. And that's actually a really empowering concept.
How so?
Well, because it means we have some control over those feelings and actions if we can learn to work with our thoughts.
Oh, I see.
So CBT uses this model where there's an event, we call it the activating event.
Okay.
That's the A. Then there's our belief about that event.
The B.
You got it. And then finally, the consequences, how we feel and react, which is the C.
So instead of A just leading straight to C, there's this B in the middle that can actually change the outcome.
Exactly. And that's what CBT helps us do.
I see, I see.
It helps us examine and maybe even change those Bs, those beliefs, and that then influences how we feel and react.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this could be misinterpreted as toxic positivity, though, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like, is it just about telling yourself to think happy thoughts no matter what?
No, not at all. It's much more nuanced than that.
Okay, good.
It's about recognizing that sometimes our beliefs about things are distorted, they're not accurate, and those distortions are what lead to a lot of our suffering.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, like one of the examples in a source I brought up was about this woman, Tilda.
Okay.
She feels really down after a guy doesn't ask her out for a second date.
Ooh, I've been there.
Right. It's a relatable situation,
Yeah.
but it's not just the event itself that makes her feel bad, it's her belief about it.
Okay.
She tells herself this means she's undesirable and that she'll end up alone forever.
Wow. Okay, yeah. So her B, her belief is that this one date defines her entire future.
Exactly. And that belief may not even be true.
Right, right.
That's what CBT would help her do, examine that thought, challenge it, and see if there are other possible explanations.
So maybe the guy was just having a bad day or they weren't really that compatible anyway.
Precisely.
That
There could be tons of reasons, and CBT helps you consider those.
makes a lot of sense. So two people could have the same same event,
Uh-huh.
like the guy not calling back.
Yeah.
But their B could be totally different.
Exactly.
And that leads to completely different reactions.
Exactly. And that's where CBT gets really powerful. It gives you the tools to identify those thought patterns
Okay.
and decide if they're actually helping you or not.
I see, I see. So it's not about denying reality. It's about understanding how our thoughts shape it.
You got it.
So this is all making sense, but how do you actually do CBT? Like, what are some of the tools for challenging these unhelpful thoughts?
Yeah. So one of the first things you learn in CBT is to identify what we call thinking errors.
Thinking errors. Okay.
These are like mental shortcuts. Our brains take them, but they often lead to distorted thinking.
Oh, I see, I see.
So some common ones are catastrophizing, fortune telling, or like labeling ourselves.
Okay, I think I've definitely fallen into some of those traps before.
Yeah, we all do.
But could you give me an example? I'm more of a visual learner, you know?
Sure, yeah. So imagine you're at a work meeting and you accidentally spill coffee on yourself.
Oh, no.
Right. And you immediately jump to the conclusion that everyone saw it, they're all judging you,
Oh, my God, yes.
and now your career is over.
Yeah.
That's classic catastrophizing, taking a relatively minor event and blowing it way out of proportion.
Yeah, I can see how that could really spiral.
Totally.
Right.
And CBT would help you slow down,
Okay.
recognize that thought,
Mhm.
and then challenge it.
Okay.
Like, is it really true that your career is over because you spilled some coffee?
Right. Probably not.
What's the evidence? Probably not much.
Yeah, even if people saw, they probably don't care as much as I think they do.
Exactly. CBT helps you put things into perspective.
Okay, I like that.
Another really useful tool is that ABC form we talked about earlier.
Oh, right, with the activating event and the beliefs.
You got it. The A, the B, and the C, the consequence.
Okay.
And by actually writing it down,
Uh-huh.
you start to see those connections more clearly.
So it's like getting it out of my head and onto paper.
Exactly. It helps you detach from the emotion and see the situation more objectively.
Okay, that makes sense.
And from there, you can start to challenge those unhelpful Bs, those beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
But this isn't about forcing yourself to think positive things you don't believe. It's about looking for evidence,
Okay.
considering other explanations and coming up with more balanced and realistic thoughts.
So it's not about denying reality, it's about seeing it more clearly and finding ways to cope.
Exactly.
I like that.
And sometimes the best way to challenge a belief is to test it out in the real world.
Oh, right, you mentioned that before, behavioral experiments.
Yeah.
I'm really curious about those.
So, for example, let's say you're terrified of public speaking
Mm-hmm.
because you believe you'll freeze up, make a fool of yourself, and everyone will think you're incompetent.
Oh, yeah, the classic fear.
Right. So a behavioral experiment might involve, like, volunteering to give a presentation at work
Oh, whoa.
or joining a public speaking group.
So you're basically facing your fear head on.
Exactly. And often what you find is that your worst case scenario doesn't happen.
Okay.
Maybe you feel a little nervous, but you get through it.
Yeah.
And people are actually receptive.
Oh, right.
And this can start to chip away at that limiting belief
Interesting.
that you're incapable of public speaking.
I love that. It's like taking your therapy out into the world.
Totally. And putting those thoughts to the test.
Mm-hmm.
And by repeatedly challenging those unhelpful beliefs, you can start to, rewire your brain and develop a more positive and resilient outlook.
Okay, that makes sense.
So circling back to the toxic positivity question,
Yeah.
I think CBT only becomes toxic if it's used to avoid dealing with difficult emotions or to force yourself into an overly optimistic view.
When it's not realistic.
Exactly, when it's not called for.
Okay, so it's about using it as a tool for growth, not as a way to bypass real human experience.
Exactly. And this is where the comparison to Eastern philosophies gets really interesting.
Oh, yeah, you mentioned Buddhism earlier.
Right.
Like, how would a Buddhist approach to dealing with anxiety or anger differ from CBT?
Well, CBT is very much focused on changing those unhelpful thoughts and behaviors so you can function better in the world,
Okay.
But Eastern philosophies like Buddhism often aim for a more profound transformation,
Oh,
like a liberation from suffering altogether.
so it's a different end goal.
Yes, and they also have different views of the self.
Oh, how so?
CBT works with your sense of self, helping you manage your thoughts and feelings.
Huh.
But some Eastern philosophies, like Advaita Vedanta, actually question the very existence of a separate self.
Wow. Okay, that's a pretty big difference.
It is.
Yeah.
And the techniques are also quite distinct.
In what way?
Well, CBT is very structured with practical steps.
Mm-hmm.
But Eastern traditions often emphasize meditation, mindfulness, and acceptance,
Okay.
which are less goal-oriented in that CBT sense.
So it's not necessarily about choosing one over the other. They're just different approaches.
Right, and it's worth noting there can be some overlap.
Oh, okay.
Mindfulness techniques are being used in CBT more and more.
Yeah, I've heard of that.
And Eastern philosophies can certainly improve well-being.
It's cool to see how they can complement each other.
It is, and ultimately it's about finding what works best for you.
That makes sense. So for someone listening to all of this and trying to decide if CBT is for them, what's the takeaway?
Yeah, I think the main thing is that CBT gives you really concrete tools to understand how your thoughts are playing a role in your feelings and actions,
Mm-hmm.
And it gives you ways to work with that so you're not just swept away by it.
Right.
Right. But we started off with this idea of toxic positivity, right?
Yeah, we did.
So how does all of this fit into that?
Well, I think it depends on how CBT is used, right?
Okay.
If it's used to really face challenges,
Yeah.
to examine those B beliefs like we talked about, and to develop better coping skills, then it can be incredibly powerful.
Okay, there's a but there.
There is, yeah.
Yeah.
If it's used to suppress valid negative emotions or to force yourself into this overly optimistic outlook when that's just not realistic,
Yeah.
then yeah, it could definitely become what people are calling toxic.
So it's about like awareness, knowing yourself,
Yeah,
knowing what you want to get out of it.
exactly. Exactly. And honestly, even if someone never formally does CBT,
Mm.
just having this awareness of the ABC model,
Mm.
like how your thoughts are impacting your experience,
Yeah.
that's huge in itself.
You're not just reacting to life anymore, you're understanding it.
Exactly.
It's empowering.
It is. So this kind of leaves us with a question for everyone listening. Okay, I like this.
What are some of those B beliefs that you've been carrying around?
Ooh.
The ones that maybe aren't serving you so well?
Yeah.
Or could it benefit from, like, a little reality check?
Oh, that's a good one. That's a good one to think about.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for breaking all of this down.
Yeah, of course.
This has been a really, really interesting trending tidbits.
My pleasure. Always happy to chat about this stuff.
And to everyone listening, thanks for joining us. We'll be back next week with another deep dive. And until then, stay curious.